There's a damning report in regard to the death toll in Gaza. Now, we've been hearing a lot about how the death toll has been inflated by the Gazan health ministry. But is that really the case? Let's get to the details.
We wanted to really understand what was the underreporting by the Ministry of Health. So our findings indicate that the numbers from October 7th till June actually were underreported by around 40%. This actually puts the number that the ministry is saying that already people is saying is quite high is even higher. And these are one of the highest, very high mortality rates. If you look at children under 5, children under 10, 15, 20, under 18-year-old, these mortality rates are quite high.
Now, despite constant allegations that the Palestinian health ministry has inflated death toll numbers coming out of Gaza, it turns out that a new study, a damning analysis, suggests that the death toll is actually much higher than what the Palestinian health ministry has reported. So this is a peer-reviewed study that was published Thursday of last week in the Lancet journal. And the researchers at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine said that they estimated, based on their analysis, as many as 64,260 people were killed in traumatic injury deaths in Gaza between October 7th of 2023 and June 30th of last year. Obviously, some time has passed. The war has continued to rage on in Gaza, so the death toll is even higher than that. But the authors of the study estimate that the death toll for the first 9 months of the war was around 41% higher than the figure of 37,877 reported by the Palestinian Health Ministry. Women, children under the age of 18, and people over the age of 65 accounted for 59.1% of the 28,257 deaths for which age and sex data were available. And they did not provide an estimate of how many of those individuals were combatants, but neither does the Palestinian Health Ministry, so we're comparing apples to apples here. Now, to arrive at a more accurate death toll, the authors relied on statistical sampling or a statistical sampling technique that's known as capture-recapture. So if you're unfamiliar with that, which is totally fine because I was as well. It's basically something that's been used for mortality estimation in other war zones, including Kosovo, Sudan, Guatemala, Colombia. And so the lead author, Zenia Jamaluddin, says that this entails basically going through different lists of mortalities, including hospital reports, surveys, and social media obituaries, to basically find overlap and come up with a more comprehensive, accurate estimate of the death toll. As for why there might have been such a significant undercount, well, I have my own theories, right? But Zenia argues that while the Palestinian Health Ministry initially did have robust electronic death records, the destruction of Gaza's healthcare system has made it incredibly difficult for them to compile numbers when it comes to the death toll. Plus, there are still thousands of people trapped under the rubble in Gaza, which has effectively been leveled by the Israeli Defense Forces, especially in the north. And using their analysis of the first 9 months of the war, the authors also argue that the current death toll estimate is even likely below the published numbers as well. Well below the actual death toll number. So although we only analyze data up to June of 2024, they write, the official health ministry estimate from October 7th of 2023 to October 6th of 2024 was 41,909, the study says, adding that if that level of underreporting continued from July to October of 2024, it's possible that number of Palestinians killed in Gaza now exceeds 70,000. And by the way, Cenk, even that might be an undercount. So take a look at this, and then I want to get your thoughts.
In reality, the number of mortality might be higher if we also include the issue of not accessing healthcare, heart attacks, and some of that aspect. Infectious diseases, maternal care, pregnant women not being able to get access to proper delivery, and so on.
So the situation has been dire. We knew that. But in terms of the number of people who've been killed, the numbers are obviously even more dire than what people expect.
Yeah. So a lot of thoughts here. First, Lancet Journal is a very respected outlet here. So if they published it, they very likely double check the science on it, et cetera. So it's a good estimate, but of course it's an estimate. So is the number exactly right? Of course, they would tell you it's not exactly right. They're estimating based on what they know about this particular disaster and other disasters that they have studied, right? But the core fact is indisputably true, which is that it's much higher than the 46,000 that the health ministry in Gaza is reporting, and that's obvious logic, by the way, because they're not reporting anyone that hasn't showed up in a hospital or in some sort of health facility and who has passed away, right? Either before they got there or while they got there. But if you're buried on the rubble, well, you didn't get counted. And there's tons and tons of people buried under the rubble. And then, so I don't believe in adding in numbers like heart attacks. A heart attack could have happened in a million different ways. But did the lack of humanitarian aid lead to starvation and infectious diseases? That's indisputable. I would add those numbers. I would add, so there's a real way of looking at this. But now back to the propaganda you normally hear from mainstream media. They will always say, oh, but Israel disputes the 46,000 number because they say Hamas. Like they will say, oh, the Hamas health ministry has given that to you. Just saying Hamas in a sentence doesn't prove a goddamn thing. Remember, even if you take Israel's wild, outrageous, obviously made up numbers, these days they're claiming, they change the number all the time. These days they're claiming that 17,000 of the people killed were militants. And then press asked them, oh, that's super interesting number. Where'd you get that number from? And they're like, nowhere. They're hilarious. They just make stuff up. But even if you believe that number, which you shouldn't believe at all, it's an outrageous, ridiculous lie based on absolutely no evidence. But even if you believed it, that leaves 30 to 50,000 civilians killed. Remember, all of this was because 860 Israeli civilians were killed. So now they're saying we've murdered 30 to 50,000 in retaliation for the 860, less than 1,000 for civilians. There was also military killed on October 7th. But you see, our civilians are worth more than 50 of your civilians because we are superior to you. And we get to colonize you, we get to murder you, and we get to take your land. So this is yet another piece of overwhelming evidence that adds on to the genocide and ethnic cleansing that the terrorist state of Israel has been doing for well over a year now.
Oh, Cenk, you're absolutely right that the Lancet is a respected journal here in the United States. And the study that we're referring to is a peer-reviewed study that's been published in the Lancet. But nonetheless, the Israeli government is rejecting the study, and in fact, they claim that there is a hateful bias against Israelis. I mean, it's the go-to talking point here. So let's get to a statement from that was issued by their embassy in London. They write that, as has already been proven countless times before, has it? Any information that derives from Gaza cannot be trusted, nor can you ignore the Lancet's history of anti-Israel bias?
What a bunch of morons calling scientists anti-Semitic because of facts. I mean, it's really, it's peak mental, right? Saying, because to them, their one excuse for everything is everybody's an anti-Semite. The whole world's against us. So no, we're not the ones lying. Literally everyone else on earth, all of the press, also, by the way, including tons of Jewish members of the press, all the human rights groups, tons of Jewish members in the human rights groups, et cetera. They're all lying. They're all anti-Semites. Israel says we provide no evidence at all. All we just say is Muslim dirty terrorist. You have to believe us. Otherwise, you're an anti-Semite. No, everyone putting out those statements and all the people in the cabinet in this right-wing government of Israel, they're all deep bigots. They're like the worst bigots on earth. They think Muslim lives are totally and utterly worthless. And so I'm not interested in what these racists think is anti-Semitic, okay? No, none of that. Anytime you hear an Israeli, I'm not talking about American Jews, there is anti-Semitism across the world and there is here in America. But when you hear a monster terrorist from the Israeli government talking about anti-Semitism, that's to cover up their own bigotry and racism, which is 1,000 times worse than any so-called anti-Semitism at Lancet, at the Lancet Journal, one of the most respected medical journals in the world. You'd have to be a lunatic to believe that that's driven by anti-Semitism. It's driven by data and science. Your hatred of Palestinians and your deep lust for murdering them is what's actually racist and bigoted. And when you say 50 of your people murdered is not equivalent of one of ours, that is by definition racist. There's no defense of Israel left that isn't based on racism. We get to murder 50 times, 100 times more than they kill of ours. Why? Because their lives are worthless and our lives are superior. And the most important thing in the world, America, send me more of your money. I haven't murdered enough Palestinians yet. That's what I think of this disgusting Israeli government.
They're also, when they put out statements like this, inherent in the statement, inherent in the denial is an acceptance that these death toll numbers are insanely high and make the Israeli military and government look really bad. And it kind of reminds me of what happened in the hospital bombing that took place in Gaza early on in the war, where the Israelis were like, no, we didn't do it. It was actually a result of one of Hamas's rockets that misfired and hit the hospital. We would never do it. We would never do it. And then they proceeded to bomb every single hospital in the Gaza Strip.
Everyone. They destroyed every hospital in Gaza. Every hospital. You know who does that? Terrorists do that. If you say Muslims are terrorists for killing one Israeli, but Israelis are not terrorists for killing 50 Palestinian civilians in return. And that is, by the way, the most generous reading based on totally made up numbers by Israel on the number of terrorists that they killed. And if you say even by Israel's numbers, 50 of them, of course, are not worth one of us. Well, brother or sister, I hate to break it to you, but you're a deep racist. And you're supporting a terrorist government that proudly declares that they're not done murdering yet. Self-defense, all of this was an accident. All the civilians killed, they did not intend to kill. That's why they're not terrorists. The Muslims are dirty, dirty savages. And whenever they kill, it's not to fight an occupation. It's because they're violent by nature. But when we slaughter and slaughter and slaughter and slaughter Muslims, no, we're pure innocent. We didn't intend to kill any. If you believe that Israel didn't intend to kill any civilians in Gaza, please go into a mental health facility. You have no idea how much you've grown detached from empirical reality. Your biases have let your brain rot to a point where you think, no, only Israeli lives matter. And you see how everybody else is biased against me. No, I don't see it. I think you're deeply biased against those poor Palestinians. Can you please, for the love of God, stop murdering them? It's not that complicated.
So the death toll is so egregious. The war has been so brutal toward the civilians in Gaza that now mainstream media is finally speaking up against Joe Biden continuing to fund Israel's efforts in slaughtering people in Gaza. And so here is MSNBC anchor Chris Hayes weighing in on the matter.
President Biden is gonna hand a blank check for Israel over to the incoming Trump administration, $8 billion in weaponry given over to an ally waging what I think can only be described as total war in Gaza. That has, according to, I think, multiple independent experts and reporters and NGOs, been committing war crimes and ethnic cleansing, according to a former Israeli defense minister, where Israeli soldiers say they have been ordered to target and kill innocents arbitrarily, including children. We know which vision of American global engagement the Trump administration will carry out. But it isn't just Trump who this week is making an absolute mockery of every last lecture we deliver to the Russians or the Chinese or anyone else about respecting human rights and international law. It is President Joe Biden too, leaving a disgraceful legacy. A liberal president doing untold damage to the liberal international order.
I mean, what liberal international order? Biden has aided and abetted the deterioration of international law, especially as it pertains to war crimes. And he did that on behalf of Israel. Period, full stop. I mean, what liberal international order? What liberal national order? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, total nonsense. So look, I hated that Russia invaded Ukraine. I'm the only guy apparently left who believes in what George H.W. Bush said, that we should have a new world order where you are not allowed to attack a sovereign country that did not attack you. But apparently that's too much to ask for Republicans, for Democrats. And so Russia should have never invaded Ukraine. But when Israel attacks 5, 6 of their neighbors, and we go, oh, that's allowed. Yeah, that's fine. And we say, well, terrorism is not acceptable. You can't kill innocent civilians. But we allow Israel to kill 50 times the number of innocent civilians that any terrorist has done to them. We make a mockery. We make a mockery of the rule of law, international law, our standards, human rights. And by the way, it is a mockery. It's a joke. The American leaders are totally lying. They will allow us to kill anyone we like. We killed nearly 1 million people in Iraq. They'll allow Israel to kill endless number of Muslims, and they'll never, ever, ever hold them to account. Why? Because AIPAC was the #1 donor in American politics this year, in this election cycle. #1. So they bought our Congress. That's just, look, if you don't know, okay, that's just reality, man. They bought our Congress. Washington, D.C. is occupied territory. Okay, it's not just Gaza. God knows what they're gonna do to us next. So now, with Chris Hayes, brilliant segment, loved it. You guys should watch the whole thing. Give Chris a ton of credit, because none of the other cowards at MSNBC would dare do that, because then they would get a stern talking to. You're not allowed to oppose AIPAC or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. How dare you? You have to keep saying how nice they are. Yeah, I mean, they funded the genocide. They funded ethnic cleansing, according to Israel's own former defense minister. But you're not allowed to tell the truth on MSNBC. So I appreciate that Chris did it. Now, I do have to be honest and say, he and along with everyone else should have been doing it for the entirety of the last year. That would have given Israel 3 months to defend itself and slaughter and slaughter and slaughter, and still give you a whole year to criticize Biden. But no, you can't do that before an election. Democratic ass must be kissed, no matter how corrupt they are, no matter how much they violate all of the principles that Democratic voters believe in and vote for. But the liars at MSNBC will trick you into thinking that they're nice people. Oh, there was nothing we could do but fund ethnic cleansing and genocide. No, there was a lot you could do. You chose not to do it, Joe Biden, because you're deeply corrupt and you're a terrible and evil person. So thank you, Chris, for finally saying it. Of course, none of the other cowards are going to say it on MSNBC. And it's not too little too late, because we're still funding Israel. We just gave them another $8 billion to kill more Palestinians, because they haven't murdered enough, according to every sick person in power in Washington, D.C.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.